Hey guys, it's Megan, Orxler with us. Where we last left off, let's see, checking. Last time on What If Bell Was a Chaos Warrior, I didn't really do a thing with Bell, but I more or less focused on the other two to see how they were progressing with their gifts. Lily is going down the road of, a Slaaneshi cultist. This one, more depicted around the usual stuff, glory, getting good food. She found some of the dregs from the Soma Familia, and some of the more glory-hungry ones. The ones who weren't there for the alcohol, but more or less were very prideful and wanted glory for themselves. And so, that, you got to learn a little bit about what's happening over there, how they're dealing with that person who came from Slaanesh, the one who was sent over, which is a demonette, if you hadn't figured that out. And someone who someone you don't really want to tango with, in any sense of that word. Then you had Welf. Welf went on a bit of an adventure outside of Aurario, where he went looking for a old wizard's thing to find out how to make truly good weapons without the use of magic. Like magic weapons, which, as you would know, is his sort of thing. He doesn't like magic weapons because they break very easily, very quickly. But as he was going, Tzeentch sort of gave him a history lesson in the ways of how the world came to be and how the original four sort of lost their place. Because originally, they were the dominant power, the dominant gods. Their power was unrivaled until, the descent of the new gods, as they would put them. As the Chaos Gods don't consider themselves gods, they consider themselves beyond that. Though they take the term God as just, that's how humans would worship them, and it's just the easiest way to get pull again. True worshippers would call them the powers or aspects of life, or the aspects of reality, because that's how self-inflated their ego kind of is. But I digress. As we get back on with the story with Bell and Elora. As we get rolling with the day, it's been a couple of weeks since Bell and Elora was attacked by those corn worshippers. They were heavily injured in that fight. Bell just barely coming out on top when he had to dig into Khorne's power to be able to overpower this, albeit ferocious fighter. He was also severely malnourished and probably dehydrated. These were sort of the worshippers that were only blood crazed. There was no really martial prowess. They only had good weapons. And good is putting it lightly. Actually, not putting it lightly, kind of, not overestimating, but it's kind of like that middle of the pack. They aren't the best, but they'll do their work. Bell couldn't tell you who they are because they had no discernible features. They all had a bit of mutilation amongst each other. A bit of face being torn up, eyes gouged out, lips bitten off. These guys were hurting themselves just cause. Khorne had to sort of explain to Bell a little bit after, saying that this is what happened to those who try to take his power, as he doesn't lie. That is one of the things with Khorne, is he is not lying. He has not lied since meeting Bell. He's been forward. He has essentially stated to Bell that this is what happened to those who can't handle his power. That you must be of strong will and mind to maintain yourself, but Khorne will forever always put greater amounts of wrath, fury, and bloodlust for you to go out in the world and get blood. But you must gain it through fair combat, You can't be like a little sissy and stab people in the back and expect to get it. It's gotta be stabbing in the front. And that's how Khorne explains himself, that the truth in the world is through blood. Bell questions sort of like, well, how do you maintain anything like that? And Khorne just simply restates that if a society is strong enough, it should be able to maintain itself even with his bloodlust. Bell can kind of see a twisted logic there, but he also sees the faults in it. And though he kind of challenges Khorne on it, Khorne isn't even angry, he's kind of glad. Because they're trying to... Khorne in his mind is trying to help sculpt Bell into a formidable warrior and champion. He doesn't just want Bell to be a mindless drone that just obeys every order. A true warrior has their own free will and sense of right and wrong and what's honorable and what isn't. As long as Bell doesn't outwardly rebel against them, he will sort of let Bell do his thing. Same with the others, really. As long as he tithes a certain percentage of worship to them, like Slaanesh. Slaanesh is all about doing what you love. Nurgle's pretty much the same thing. He just wants to spread his love. Khorne just wants blood. It's really it. And then Tzeentch is the only one who would probably actively try to fuck over Bell. Is the best way to put it. But I digress. Went off a little tangent. Bell is sort of going through... As a Bell and Allura was kind of screwed up in that fight. Even with the gifts that they could have gotten, the gods can't really put too much power in it, otherwise it may disrupt the balance between the four. And Khorne doesn't want her to automatically heal from these wounds, because despite the gifts she's been given, he believes one should also learn to deal with wounds. So she's wounded and kind of weakened from this. So Bell and her's time has kind of been delayed because they gotta walk on foot. They don't really have a lot of travel, and they gotta take more breaks for Allura to properly gain rest and to heal. Bell isn't doing not terribly, but he got bit battered through that fight as well. So as he and Allura are sleeping one night, they're both resting by their nice little campfire that they both made off the road a bit. When in the middle of the night, they're jumped. It's quick, it's efficient, and it's surprisingly well coordinated. The only thing that's able to happen is Allura's able to kill one person by having her Morningstar that's always pretty much close to her, swinging it, killing one dude, and then she's dogpiled, and then Bell's dogpiled. As he's able to take his sword and stab one. As they're both taken away in the middle of the night after being knocked unconscious, they have no idea where they're going. They're dragged off into the middle of the woods. The Bell, as they're being dragged, Bell in a little bit comes to his senses as he finds himself in a cage, along with Allura. Their weapon's gone, and if they had any armor, it's gone too, which they really didn't, but you know. As Bell wakes up, he is groggy, because, you know, being knocked out isn't very fun. He comes to and he's looking around. All he sees around him is his little cage and an encampment of bandits. Numbers not too great, not too small either. They're not like numbering 5 or 10. They got a good probably 20 to 30 people. Enough for like at least a little decent raid if they were going to do one. Bell wakes up, and as he's looking around, he's kind of freaking out. He sees both men, women, a couple of elves, a dwarf, humans, some halflings, nothing too major. As he could see what he assumes to be the leader, which is a big, gruff man with a long beard and shaved head. You know, stereotypical raid boss or bandit leader. He's looking around. He sees he's actually being guarded by a couple of people. A dwarf, an elf, and a halfling. Nothing too big. As Bel's making it seem like he's still unconscious, he's listening close. As he can hear amongst the group, there are a couple of arguments. They're questioning, why didn't we just kill them, take their stuff? Why don't they try to go north up to slave traders? Ultimately, they're all kind of arguing about what to do, but there's still it's more like hushed arguments from individual group leaders. Bel, just right away, can see this group is pretty much at each other's throats, to some extent. No one can really agree, and the only one who really has control is that big boss, as he's talking to what seems to be not representatives, but his sort of people that he sort of commands. It's an elf, a dwarf, and of course, a halfling. He looks kind of bored listening to all of them talk. His armor actually has proper armor. Nothing too big, just like a chain shirt, some pants, and maybe a bit of gauntlets here and there. As Bel's looking at this, he can just see in the bandit leader's eyes, he's getting fed up with this. Because each of the group want to do their own thing, and their individual people that they got are nipping at each other, is the best way to put it. So he's trying to figure out how to keep a lid on all this, or else they're going to be killing each other. As Bel's sitting there, one of the people in front of his thing takes notice and is like, "Hey boss, Cad's awake." As the leader actually looks kind of relieved, the fact that, well, at least those will distract them all from keeping him just constantly annoyed. So he walks over to Bel and sort of just like, "Well, look who we have here. Someone woke up finally. It seems like your girlfriend ain't doing too well." At the mention of girlfriend, of course, Bel flushes. This gets a couple of coos from some of the female groups, but that's about it. "Now, what are we gonna do with you? There ain't too much we could do with you. After all, you ain't probably worth nothing. But maybe you're worth something. I know she'll fetch a pretty penny. Real beauty she is. Probably could sell her to that, Isis Familia? I think that's Familia's name in Aurario. Familia over in Aurario, they're always looking for new girls. Or was it, Amazonians or something other?" As Bel actually gets angry at this and actually tries to get up, but then he realizes he's tied to the post. As he yanks on it, the cage actually rattles a decent bit. He's like, "Ooh, guess it looks like he's got a bit of strength in him. That's better. Well, probably won't be worth much anyway, but, I'll have to decide on your fate." As he goes back over to go sit by his chair, as he can, after hearing and looking at what he saw, Bel was taking notes. The elf sort of had a disgusted look on his face, thinking about selling people into slavery. The halfling looked actually quite excited about the prospect, and the dwarf looked about neutral. He didn't really care, as he was just sort of part of this group with the rest of the dwarves that are around. They really don't have a stake in anything. Though, they do want to get back to some good old raiding, attacking caravans, something other, instead of just sitting around all the time. As Bel's just sitting there looking at this, as they're all just waiting, as everything eventually eases onto the night. Eventually, Elora wakes up, and they're served food, quote-unquote. Their food is more like slop you would feed to pigs. It's nothing rotten or nothing, it's just not the highest quality. As Bel can see a couple of people playing with his and Elora's weapons. The only person who's been able to use the Morning Star is a dwarf. And it looks like to be the dwarf leader, quote-unquote, leader, quote-unquote. And and the halfling has taken a liking to Bel's sword. As he's swinging around, he's like, "Oh, this is a good sword. I can't wait to use this for some chopping or other." As when everything slowly eases on into the night, you had the elf representative come over. Or the elf of the group walk over and kneel next to the cage. She says, "Young one, are you okay?" As Bel is about to speak, everything slows down for him for a second. As it's only seeming like time stopped. It's in the back of his head. I'm not doing the voice, I'm sorry. It's like, kid, listen to this. Why don't you try to get them to fight each other? It's just like, so who said that? It's like, who do you think? It's me, Tzeentch. The old powerful Tzeentch, god of knowledge, all that jazz. Remember? Good. Alright, moving on. You see, kid. You see, you were watching earlier. You were very observant. That's one of the reasons why I like you. You can get all of them to turn on each other. You just gotta play at the right spots. She doesn't agree with sending you to the slavers or nothing. Especially that girl over there, Alora. Use that as leverage. Like, wait, what? He's just like, oh, well, I can't tell you everything, but figure it out. Those are my hands. Go! As Tzeentch fades from his mind. As Bel's just left there dumbfounded a little bit, speaking as he just... What? Are you okay, child? It's like, yeah, I'm fine. And Laura's fine as well, I guess. As she just sort of goes, so that's a name. Well, it isn't ever too much bother. But aside from that, it'd probably be a good idea. Sorry, throat's dry. I don't know what happened. As the woman just sort of rubs her chin. Hopefully I can convince them not to send you to slave pits, but I may not have a choice. Season no caravans lately, so things have been running pretty dry around here. Spell's like, have you been with these guys for a long time? It's just like, oh, we all used to do some adventuring back in the day, back in Orario, before our dungeon was a bitch and kicked us out. Bell's like, oh, well, why'd you do that? She found better candidates. As Belle's just like, as she's just shaking her head, I'll tell you, gods in Orario aren't worth nothing. They raise you up thinking you can be all this and that in their little world and part of their familia, as a woman's just throwing her hands, and then they dump you the second they find something better. As Belle is just listening to these words, he knows a few points. These people have been with her, but now she's starting to question it. And she also knows that the gods of Orario aren't worth nothing. Belle's just like, well, sorry to hear that, not all gods are good, Yeah, kid. Now I'll tell you. She takes on, so, who do you worship then, Or do you worship nobody, kind of like me now? As Belle's like, oh, there is a less known religion, pantheon I'd go with. She's intrigued as she's just sitting there quiet as she uses her hand to gesture for him to keep on. He's like, it's called the powers, the primordials. She cocks her head at that. As being an elf, she's much older than she looks, but she's never heard of these primordial or powers. So they must exceed or her, been around longer than her, or they just aren't very well known. She gestures for him to continue. Again, they sort of represent aspects of life. Death, war, honor, love, all knowledge, life, all that sort of stuff. And they seem to be doing good things. Like, me and Alora seem to be fine, and we worship them. She's like, yeah, well, highly doubt they're actual physical creatures and actual things. As she sort of says that, it's like, well, you want to know their names? As Bell is trying to get her to be enticed, and his innocent nature, as he's putting it up as, he hopes it will be enough to get her to, not side with them possibly. As it's happening, he's trying to reel her in slowly but surely. He can't just spring it all at once. It's gotta be a bit by bit. She's just like, oh, I hope this works. She's just like, sure, kid. What is it? It's like, well, there's Korn, Tzeentch, Nurgle, and Slaanesh. Is there anything in particular you want? She's like, kid, I wish for a lot of things, but I kind of wish we weren't in this fucking situation. Could ask Tzeentch. He's knowledge. It's like, oh, sure. What, do I need to light some candles, do a seance? No, you just pray and ask for Tzeentch. He can help you. Kind of wants you to be smart on your own, but he'll help. She's like, yeah, well. As she looks at where the moon is, she's like, it's gonna be sun in a little while. I'm tired. You better get some rest. Tomorrow's not gonna be an easy day for you. As she goes to walk off. As it's happening, she goes to her little tent and goes to lay down and just thinks. Stupid kid. Doesn't even realize what kind of mess he's in. He's already talking to me like I'm a normal person. She rubs her eyes and just takes a moment. She's like, she just looks at her hand. She's like, there's no harm in it. As she sort of puts him in like a prayer position, she's like, Tzeentch, god of primordial of knowledge, I would like your guidance. And then, quick as a whip, she feels her consciousness or shifted to a space. As what appears before her is like a bird. It's a crow. It's like, yes? She's like, where the hell am I? As she's looking around, darting her eyes back and forth. Nowhere and everywhere. In the present, past, or future. I can't tell you. But I can tell you this. You called me, so what you need? She's like, you're Tzeentch. Yes, maybe. No, kinda, sorta. It's hard to tell sometimes in my mind. But that doesn't matter. What do you need? She's like, she's just talking to a kid. Don't know his name. White-haired, red eyes. Oh, you're talking about Bell. Bell, yes, he's a good kid. Good kid. That's kind of annoying how the others are trying to take him. As he's starting smumbling to himself, he's like, oh, sorry. Just, pitter-patter, get at her. So, what can I do for you? It's like, well, you said you have knowledge, so why don't you tell me about a situation? It's like, oh, situation, indeed. Tell me. Always like putting my mind to work. As she's like, well, the issue is that she goes on to explain about the group, how from being like, good little adventure group, they sort of fallen into banditry, and now she's seeing that they're all getting kind of sloppy, that they jumped on a couple of people, are going to sell them into slavery, which is something they promised they wouldn't do. And it just seems like they're stagnating and going downhill. And you can just hear, and she would just hear, and with complete disgust. Tzeentch absolutely hates stagnation. He's like, oh, they seem like dead ends. Dead weight. Unable to progress. Sounds like you should lose them. But I can't just abandon them. Hey, it doesn't matter if you've been together a long time, forever, eons, it don't matter. As soon as they start becoming an issue, you need to lose them. I can't just do that to my friends. Will they really be friends if they go back on their words? I just selling a poor boy and woman into slavery. Does that really sound like the people you knew? That they betrayed what they thought? And she's just quiet. If you ask me, maybe someone else should take the lead. After all, who knows from the sounds of it that bozo of a human that's leading doesn't know what he's doing. He's listening to all you and taking bad advice, especially from little halfling. Never liked halflings, always annoying. Never clever, but not smart. As she just takes a moment to process the words, like, oop, time's up, time to wake up. Alright, go bye, and see you later. And don't forget, I'm only just a call away. And then he flaps out of existence. As she wakes up, being awoken by one of her, not minions, but one of her underlings in the group. She wakes up as she's kind of disturbed, but also can't see a fault in the thinking of the avian. Though it doesn't help that he seemed very persuasive with the logical sense. As Belle is sitting there, the halfling comes over and just starts to taunt him. As the elf comes out of her tent and she sees the half-elf or halfling taunting him, it's like, oh, it's gonna be so fun to sell you and your dear sister into slavery. It's gonna be right fun. I wonder how much we can get for you. As he's just looking, you ain't much. You look pretty soft, pretty weak. Probably a copper. And your sister, well, ooh, get a lot for her. It probably wouldn't be bad to taste. As he's about to say taste the merchandise, he gets too close to the little cell. As let's say Belle's at one of the angles of one. And it's sort of like coming down like iron bars, not like across it. Belle's able to stick his foot out and kick the dude in the face. It's like, ow, little bastard. As he's covering his nose, as it is now bleeding. Belle's like, keep talking. And as he's about to say, I'll kill you, and you can just hear a very nice laugh, like a very loud laugh coming from the chieftain, quote unquote, or leader, whatever you wish to call him. He's just like, oh, I'm starting to like this kid. He's good for a laugh. Rascal, get up. Jesus. Just because a kid's in a cage doesn't mean he can't kick your ass. With both hands stand behind his back. So he's laughing, and this gets like a look of pure venom from the halfling. As he's about to take the sword and reach in there, the elf comes over and puts a simple hand on his shoulder. He's like, try that. Alan, sure. That sword goes somewhere where the sun doesn't shine. As the halfling just looks at her and then just spits on the ground right in front of Belle and shoves past her. So as the elf looks down at Belle, as Belle gives a nod, and she gives a nod as well, as she goes closer, like, it seems, Tzeentch, your god isn't fake. It's like, you talk to Tzeentch? As Laura is awake to hear this, like, ah, Lord Tzeentch, he always knows what to do. Always wise. As the elf is just like, yes, he is. And that doesn't matter. I can ruminate on what he told me. Do not, as she takes her sword blade, think that's a definite. Understood, boy? I may be willing to listen and talk to you, because you are a boy. But as she, like, sort of twinks it, like, takes a knife and, like, not cuts deep, but sort of, like, kind of that, like, very little scrape, and it's just like, I've been a killer for a long time. Longer than you, and probably than your whole generation of family. Don't forget that. She takes a knife and just lightly cuts Belle. She wipes her blade off as Belle looks over, and though she can't see it, he's getting a little bit of an evil smile. This'll The seeds of doubt have been sown, and now all they gotta do is wait. As we cut over to Aurario, fast forwarding in time to late at night. A poor fox woman of pure yellow goldish hair, bright blue eyes, and fair complexion. She's sitting there, lamenting the fact of her lot in life being a whore in the red light district among the Amazonian, or Isis Familia. Yeah, Isis Familia. She just got done talking to her friend Aisha. Making sure I was saying it properly. Also, it's the Ishtar Familia. Isis is a god from Greek mythology. I think I got them mixed up. I mean, Egyptian mythology. From the Ishtar Familia. As Haruhime is sitting there lamenting her life after just being visited by her friend Aisha, she laments on how she's dirty and filthy because she hates the fact that, well, she is what she is, which is, in her mind, a whore, even though she's never actually been with anybody. Though this is a secret, Aisha has sort of kept to herself. As she's lamenting this fact, she feels a calming presence wash over her. And for the first time, she actually feels happy. As she's in her dream, as she has just gone to bed a little bit ago, she's dreaming, and in her mind, she appears in a garden that's very fair and very beautiful. As she sits there and she pops up and is just looking around like, what happened? As she's just in the back of her mind, it's like, oh, don't worry, dear. Everything's good here in my garden. Who said that? As she's looking all around, in her eyes, this garden is downright beautiful. Though if you look closer, some of the things wouldn't add up. Those little caterpillars are maggots, and those little things that are zipping around aren't butterflies or bees. Those are flies. Pretty nasty looking ones too. It's like, oh, it doesn't matter, dear. My name is Nurgle, but you may call me Grandfather. What do you want? Well, I saw you were sad. Oh, talking about how you feel sickened by your flesh. How you felt it was sickening and diseased. Don't worry, child. I am here to help you. She's like, how are you going to help me? By showing you something. Come. Follow my voice deeper into my garden, please. As she wanders behind, like, trying to be, not quicken, but she's wandering behind, trying to keep pace. He's like, that's right, dear. Just follow my voice. Nothing too hard, nothing too easy. Just right. She gets deeper and deeper. She sees some of the flowers wither and give way to sickening looking plants that look like they're rotten. It's like, do not be frightened by the rot, dear. That is the way of things. You rot, decay, and then bring in new life. That is the circle of it all, and it does not change, end, or otherwise deviate. But come here, come closer and closer. As now she's getting there closer and closer, she feels like she should be sickened, but she doesn't really feel that. She feels kinda at home in this rotten mess, as she would call it, but rotten home, as she puts it now. She's getting closer and closer. She's coming to realize that this is very peaceful, and she feels a new form of happiness that she hasn't felt. As unbeknownst to her, from her walking as either barefoot or otherwise, like flip-flops, whatever she's wearing, she has not taken notice, but she hasn't taken notice to the maggots or the flies or any of the other insects that have taken to her feet. They aren't biting, but they are crawling. She doesn't feel them as they go up her legs or dress or start going around everywhere else. She's just like, what is this? Where am I? It's like, welcome to my inner sanctum, my cauldron, my garden. As she looks up, as she sees a massive cauldron, so big that could maybe fit like multiple buildings in it, maybe almost the entire city. She doesn't know. She sees nothing until a form of like noxious cloud appears in front of her, and a creature that she will fully admit is extremely grotesque appears in front of her. He's like, don't be frightened, child. My appearance may be horrid, but that is the hand I was dealt. Disease and pestilence is a part of life, and I am what that represents. Disease? No. Life. An everlasting cycle. As he sort of upholds his hand, as a beautiful flower, as, just bear with me, sprouts from his skin, and then life, decay, renewal. As a flower goes from beautiful to withering and rotting, and then springs back up, kind of soiled and foul. But as he would put it, but now, with my help, this flower will remain beautiful forever. As she's like, and what does that entail for me? It's like, well, I've come to show you, as he would hold out his hand for her. And so she's very reluctant, for some reason, with this feeling of being completely at peace and at home. She looks down and notices the insects, but to her warped perception, they aren't maggots or flies, they're butterflies and caterpillars. Step on my hand. As she goes to step, it makes a squelching sound. Though it unnerves her, she still continues as he puts her on his shoulder. Do not be afraid to grab onto my horns. Just stabilize yourself. As he takes her right over to the cauldron and shows his works. See here, as he's looking down on a little bit of an old farming community that, well, a certain little white-haired boy walked past. See here, old and withered and dying, and pain, such horrid pain, racked their bodies for ages, and no one could fix it. But then I came along, and as he, with a wave of their hands, the scene immediately shifts to where these older folk are happily walking without any bent backs or needing of crutches. They walk perfectly fine without any hindrance. And she looks amazed upon this. She sees the beauty and how good and the good he's doing for them. Though beneath that skin, they don't realize that their ailments haven't gone. The pain is just gone. So as they are walking around just fine, the bones and joints slowly but surely withering away. Though the grandfather too has a plan for that. You see, dear,
disease is not always bad. But if it bears too much for you, let me help you. My gifts, would you take it? She's like, why? He's like, well, why wouldn't you? Let me prove and show you the gifts. As well as the fact your friend, Aisha, you wouldn't want to make her sad now, would you? As Haruhime actually feels that and is now even more intrigued in this deal, because for ages she's watched as her friend has sort of worried over her and constantly tried to help her, and has even suffered at the hand of the Ishtar Familia for helping, if it was her or her mother, I can't remember which. And so what's happening now is she's contemplating, she's like, can I have time to decide? It's like, yes, my dear, take all the time you need, but if you would, keep this a secret. I am not looked too favorably in areas like here. They do not take kindly to those who I spread my word to, or those who accept it. So, okay, Nurgle. Now be on your way, dear. Head back the way you came. And have pleasant dreams. As he turns back to his cauldron and returns to stirring. As Haruhime leaves, a nice grin, foul grin kind of comes over his face. Oh, such a unique soul, such unique body. Not many foxes remain. Hopefully it will help.
Sorry about that, guy interrupted. As he calmly returns to his thing, as he speaks to himself in that calm voice, sort of ruminating on what gifts to spread next to ease the suffering. As then we cut to Haruhime as she wakes up, kind of a rapid breathing. She's like, that was... who? What? And she's just confused as she goes to lay back down to sleep. But she feels something, that, or lack of something. She doesn't feel disgusted anymore. She feels happy, at peace. She returns to her sleep. She feels bliss for the first time in her life as she falls asleep. And that's where I'm going to be ending this one off at. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. Hope you guys continue to enjoy this. And I hope you guys have a nice day, nice night, nice life.